Hey everyone, welcome to today's watch comparison. I've got two excellent divers, one from Oris, one from Longines in front of the camera today. I've been very much looking forward to doing this comparison. It's one that I get requested regularly, probably more so than any other video outside of a Submariner versus Seamaster comparison. And that video will be coming here in the next month or so. But let's talk about these two, the Oris Aquis versus the Longines Hydroconquest. If you have a budget of a little over $1,000 up to a little over $2,000, you would be wise to do your homework on each one of these watches. I think they each make very worthy additions to the tier, to the segment in the consumer market, and they do make good daily driver divers. Now, before we get into the details, I would like to thank Exquisite Timepieces. They are the Oris and Longines authorized dealer that lent these two in for the comparison and for individual reviews. I purchased a few watches from Exquisite. I bought both of my Omegas. I bought my Lake Baikal from them. I'll be buying a couple of Seikos from them really shortly. I've had great experiences each time, so I'm happy to recommend Exquisite Timepieces if you're shopping for a new watch. I'll put all of the links in the description of this video, the contact information. Now let's talk about these two. Let's get into the meat of the comparison. I know a lot of you guys like direct comparisons where I name, which watch does which thing better than the other. I think those types of videos are very helpful, very informative. So I'm going to try my best to do that here. And I'll also try my best to be very objective. I know I own an Aquis. I've owned Longines in the past. I own the Generation 2 Hydroconquest. So I think I can be pretty objective, and I'm not afraid to call out each one of the brands for anything crappy that they might do. And I'm not afraid to shower praise on the excellent elements of each one of the respective watches. So let's just jump into it. I'll put the price, I'll put the dimensions, and some of the specifications here on the screen. We'll talk about the similarities and differences, and then we'll go into those specifics of which element is done better by which brand. So both of these watches, 300 meters of water resistance. Both of them carry 2 years of warranty from the factory. The Aquis, you can get up to 3 if you have an authorized dealer activate the warranty for you. And then the big thing is price. The Aquis, $2,200 on the bracelet, the stainless steel bracelet. The Hydroconquest, $600 less at retail on bracelet at $1,600. Now both of them you can secure discounts on. So generally you will pay less for the Longines than you will pay for the Oris. And that definitely factors into a lot of watch fans' decisions on which one to purchase. So that's kind of a big element here. There is a small amount of difference in price, but there are quite a few differences in the elements. So let's continue here. Both of them have sapphire crystals, flat sapphire on the Longines with dual layers of anti-reflective treatment on the top of the crystal as well on the underside. With the Aquis, you have a dome sapphire, which is nice, but there's only inner anti-reflective treatment, and admittedly, it is kind of weak. So, if I take these outside and I bring them under the mature tree that I get my wrist rolls on outside in natural light, you really see the difference. The Longines is much easier to read at a glance, and you see the beautiful details of the sunray dial. You see the massively oversized applied Arabic markers at the 12, 6, and 9 o'clock position. And I would say I greatly prefer the anti-reflective treatment on the Longines to the Oris. That is one element that the Oris, it's rather weak in. Now let's go to the luminescence. Both of the watches carry BGW9 Super Luminova, so a very similar look, but I will say that the Oris carries a little bit more real estate, a little bit more surface area, and there is a deeper fill on these faceted applied markers. So I will say the longevity nod goes to the Aquis. The potency is probably edged out by the Aquis, but that becomes more pronounced the longer the watches are in low light. So I would say the Lum nod definitely goes to the Oris here. Now let's zoom out and talk about the movements. The Oris carries the caliber 733, which essentially is a base grade Sellita SW200-1. And I will show you this exact watch on the time grapher. And this is very consistent with each one of the Orises that I've owned over the years. About plus 8 seconds per day when it comes to daily deviation. Excellent amplitude. at 323, zero beat error, 28,800 vibrations per hour, 38 hours of power reserve, and 26 joules. Now, if we compare that to the Longines has a modified ETA. It's called the L888 caliber. And on the time grapher, it's a little bit more accurate at plus 5 seconds per day. It has good amplitude at 305, not quite as good as what's on the Oris, and a little bit of beat error. The beat rate here is 25,200 vibrations per hour, but this one carries 65 hours of power reserve, which is quite a bit more than the Solita in the Oris. And this is another element that I would say the Longines gives you more bang for buck. You get an ETA movement, you get a longer power reserve, you get a little bit better accuracy out of the factory. So I would say I do prefer the movement in the Longines to the movement in the Oris Aquis. Now let's go to the respective bracelets here, and I'm going to show you wrist shots of each one of the watches and talk about which one has a nicer bracelet, which one has a better fit. In this instance, I would say the Aquis pulls ahead here. Even though it's a little bit wider in diameter, it has a shorter or more compact lug-to-lug length and is 0.6 millimeters overall higher when it comes to the profile, the side profile, and has a much more dramatic taper of the integrated bracelet. So I would say the Aquis, it feels nicer on wrist. It feels more comfortable, and the bracelet is noticeably nicer on the Oris. I love the full articulation of each one of the links here. Both bracelets have screw links, but the Oris just feels more confidence inspiring. It feels more comfortable, and the clasp is noticeably nicer with more adjustability when it comes to half links, micro adjustment holes. It has a milled dive extension. It has a great milled push button deployant system. And I think you guys can see, especially contrasting the two, the Oris has the nicer bracelet clasp and I think the nicer fit. Now contrasting that with the Longines, I don't want you to get the impression that this has a poor fit, because it doesn't. It's thinner, and these dominant lugs, they arc down so that the bottom portion is actually a little bit lower in elevation than the bottom of the engraved case back. So it definitely kind of conforms to the natural curvature of one's wrist, and I like that. Now, if you look down at the dial at a perpendicular angle, you guys can see more of a rectangular dominant stance on wrist that is enhanced by these aggressive crown guards at the 3 o'clock position, and that can be a bit divisive because they're rather large and they do impede the use and operation of using the crown at the 3 o'clock. The crown has much nicer action, much more smooth than the crown in the Aquis, but it is a bit harder to operate with the large crown guards, and the look is a bit more square than the overall circular form of the Oris Aquis. So, you know, I like both, and I don't want to come across as too harsh on the Longines because it's a great fit. The anti-reflective treatment is nicer, there's more clarity, but again, I would prefer the Oris when it comes to the fit, when it comes to the feel and the bracelet quality. Now let's go to the next element here. Let's talk about bezel action for each one. They're pretty similar, but I would say again, the Oris is a little bit nicer here. There will be a small amount of backplay on each one of the bezels, but the Oris just feels a little bit nicer. The grip is a little bit sharper. There is more real estate on the side of the case for your fingers to grab, which will help if you're diving with this watch. Maybe you're wearing diving gloves, so that's something to be considered. But the action is not bad on either one. It's just slightly nicer on the Aquis. Now let's look at the dials for each one of these watches. We'll go in on a macro level, and I've got to say each one of them is so satisfying to look at. So if you have a macro lens for your phone, or if you have a loop, it's fun to spend some time and look at the details. I will say the overly large applied Arabics on the Longines, they're so outlandish and out there and extreme that they, you know, almost look comical. But at the same time, that's what is an identifying design feature of this watch. It's part of the charm, and they look great under low light. Now, I will say in some of the macro shots, you can see some imperfections on some of the edges. I would say the Oris has a tidier dial, a nicer execution. The applied markers are deeper and more faceted. They have more dimensionality to them. but each one of the watches really shine under the loupe, under the macro lens. You get a lot of light play. You get a lot of the different hues of green and gray, both in warm tones and in cool tones, depending on the light environment that you're in. So really well done on both of the dials. But I would say, you know what, the applied markers are a little trimmer, cleaner on the Aquis. And the Longines does have the applied hourglass logo below the 12 o'clock marker, which is nice. Now, let's talk about design inspiration here. That's one thing that I enjoy about the Oris. It's very much its own design, very contemporary, very modern. I look at this and I don't see any inspiration from any other brand, and that is really something to be commended in my opinion. I really respect that, especially considering Oris is an independently owned brand operated in the German-speaking region of Switzerland. I have a lot of respect for that. The Longines carries great history, great name cachet, but I look at some of the elements and the more I spend time with the watch, the more I notice, hey, this this font on these massive applied markers, that's the Rolex font that you take right out of the Explorer. If you look at the bezel font on the indexing in the bezel insert, the ceramic insert, that looks very much like the bigger brother Omega. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but the more you spend time with the watch, the more you notice inspiration here and there from other brands. The diamond modified handset, I think, is a derivative of the snowflake handset from Tudor. So, I mean, there are some elements, I think, on the Longines that aren't quite original, even though I would say the watch as a whole stands on its own and has its own identity. Now let's talk about the Longines, some of the other things that it does better than the Aquis. Outside of the price, outside of the movement, outside of the crown action, I think versatility is something to be considered here. There is no integrated bracelet system. This has traditional lugs, even though they are an odd width at 21 millimeter. A lot of guys have extensive strap collections, and that's a huge part of your interest in horology. You enjoy switching out a NATO strap with a bracelet, or a rubber strap, or a sailcloth, or a purlin, or a Stabe Milanese mesh. That part of wearing watches and collecting watches greatly appeals to a lot of people. And so you're able to do that, even though it is slightly more limited with the odd lug width size. You're able to do that with the Longines. And with the Oris, you're limited to OEM options or custom options. Now, that is a negative element, I think, in the case of a watch that just doesn't have great OEM options. Fortunately, the Oris, the bracelet's awesome, the rubber strap is awesome, the leather strap is really good, so I don't really consider it a negative element in this instance, but it's something to be aware of if you're cross-shopping both of these watches. Now let's close the video with elements for improvement for each one of these watches. I would say the Aquis, they need to start regulating the movement to a higher degree. We're tired of base grade Solitas. We want a little bit more regulation, positional regulation. So out of the box, it's not running +8, +10 seconds a day. It's running +4 seconds a day. You know, that would be excellent. I would pay a premium for that personally. The other negative element of the Aquis is the anti-reflective treatment. Again, is pretty weak here, and this has such a beautiful colorway. It is the best-selling iteration of the Aquis for Oris, and it would look nicer with excellent application of anti-reflective treatment on the top as well as the bottom of the dome sapphire crystal. When it comes to the Longines, the Hydroconquest, I would say the clasp is very dated here. It is a stamped metal, pressed metal. There's not as much adjustability with the micro adjustment system. The dive extension system, I would just do without. I don't think it's satisfying in the slightest. And I don't see any half links here. So adjustability could be a concern on the bracelet if you really want to get that fine-tuned fit. But other than that, I hope I've been able to illustrate the strengths and weaknesses of each one of these watches. The Oris is more expensive, and I would say the slightly nicer watch, even though it carries an inferior movement, inferior anti-reflective treatment. The bracelet is so good. The originality, the contemporary design details, the depth of the dial, the applied markers. This really is a powerful watch at close to $2,000. The Longines, on the other hand, I think is more of a value proposition. You're getting a good bracelet, You're getting a thin case, you're getting the ceramic bezel, the screw links, the dial details, the applied markers, the anti-reflective treatment, the ETA modified movement, and you're getting it all at a lesser price than the Oris Aquis. So I think if price is a big concern for you, I think you get a little bit more for your money with the Longines, especially if you can negotiate a decent discount from the authorized dealer. That's something to be aware of. But each one of these watches are excellent. It really is pick your flavor. Which element do you value more? Do you value the bracelet more? Do you value the ARC more? Do you like to finish more on one or the other? The design, the clasp, the engraved case back? I mean, you've got to pick your flavor, and I think in doing so, you will arrive at the right decision for you, which one would be the better one to add to your own watch rotation. For me, I thought the Oris spoke more to my own taste, so I bought the limited edition Lake Baikal. I believe it's my second or third Aquis that I've owned over the years. I really think the watch is great, and I love it. I love mine. Great experience with the Aquis, and my wife actually, it's one of the few sport watches that she thinks is beautiful. So that's where I stand. Hopefully this has been a helpful video. Thanks for watching it. I know it's been long. We went long here. I rambled a little bit, but hopefully we covered all of the details and you found it informative. So big thanks to Exquisite. Thanks to you guys for watching. Let me know if you have questions. Links are in the description, and I'll see you in the next video.